Amelia sat by the window, her gaze lost in the misty landscape of the English countryside. The house she had inherited from her late grandmother, Margaret, seemed more like a haunting presence than a gift. The old manor was nestled at the edge of a quiet village, surrounded by thick woods and overgrown gardens that hadn't seen a gardener in years. Yet, despite its grand size and wealth, the house felt empty, much like the feeling in Amelia's heart since her grandmother's passing. Amelia had never expected to inherit anything from Margaret. They had never been close, at least not in the traditional sense. Margaret had always been an enigma, a woman of mystery, kindness, and silence. But Amelia, having grown up in the shadows of her grandmother's wealth, knew that the woman carried secrets. Secrets that were too deep for even Amelia to understand. The letter had arrived just a week ago. It was thick, embossed with gold, and sealed in a way that hinted at its importance. Amelia had opened it with trembling hands, her heart racing, only to find that she was the sole heir to Margaret's vast estate. But there was a catch. She had to live in the manor for 1 full year, alone, taking care of the property. If she failed to do so, everything would be forfeited to an unknown benefactor, someone who had been waiting in the wings. Amelia was confused, frustrated, and anxious. What kind of game was Margaret playing? Why had she left such an odd condition attached to the inheritance? She had to know more, but for now, she had no choice but to comply. The thought of spending an entire year in the gloomy house terrified her, but she couldn't back out now. As Amelia prepared to settle into the manor, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had barely stepped foot inside when she heard a knock on the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, not after the funeral. When she opened the door, a tall man stood before her. His sharp features and confident stance immediately set him apart from the quiet villagers she had met earlier. "I'm Oliver," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "I knew your grandmother. I came to offer my help." Amelia eyed him warily. She had heard of Oliver. He was a local, or so she had been told. But she hadn't expected someone like him to be involved with Margaret. She invited him in, if only to be polite, but the unease didn't fade. Who was this man, and why had he come now? Was he another one of Margaret's secrets? "Your grandmother," Oliver continued, his voice softening, "was a woman of many layers. She kept a lot from you, Amelia. But there are things you need to know if you are going to stay here." The words hung heavy in the air, and Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. What exactly had Margaret kept from her? And what kind of life had her grandmother led before her death? Oliver's eyes glinted with an unreadable emotion. "You're not alone in this," he added, almost as if reading her thoughts. "There's much more to this inheritance than meets the eye." As the door clicked shut behind them, Amelia couldn't help but feel that her grandmother's death had opened a door to a world she was unprepared for. Something was waiting in the shadows, something that Amelia had no idea was even there. The days passed in a blur, and Amelia found herself falling into a routine, albeit one filled with uncertainty. Each morning, she would wake to the sounds of birds chirping and the soft creaks of the old manor settling. The house, once a symbol of her grandmother's wealth, now felt more like a weight, both physically and emotionally. The air was thick with the scent of age, dust, and something else she couldn't quite place. One evening, while exploring the vast library in the east wing of the house, Amelia stumbled upon an old wooden chest hidden behind a tapestry. The chest was locked, but there was a peculiar feeling in the air as though it had been waiting for her to find it. Her heart raced with anticipation as she reached for the key she had found earlier under a loose floorboard in her grandmother's study. It fit perfectly, and the chest creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the silent room. Inside, she found several old letters, photographs, and a faded journal. As she flipped through the pages of the journal, Amelia's fingers trembled. It was Margaret's handwriting, but the entries were strange, almost too personal, as if her grandmother had been documenting secrets she had never shared with anyone. The journal spoke of a time before Amelia was born, a time when Margaret had known Oliver. The entries described their relationship in a way that suggested they were once much more than just acquaintances. "Oliver, the one she never spoke of," Amelia muttered under her breath. Her mind raced. What had happened between them? Why had Margaret kept this from her? Suddenly, a loud knock on the front door interrupted her thoughts. Startled, Amelia quickly hid the journal back in the chest and rushed downstairs. When she opened the door, she was once again greeted by Oliver, who had an unreadable expression on his face. "I see you've found something," he said quietly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Amelia was taken aback. How did he know? Was he watching her? I don't know what you mean, she stammered, trying to hide her anxiety. Oliver didn't seem convinced. You don't need to lie to me. I know what you found, Amelia. I've been waiting for you to uncover the truth. His words sent a shiver down her spine. What truth? What do you know about my grandmother? Oliver sighed, his eyes softening. Your grandmother was a complicated woman, Amelia. She loved deeply, but she also had her fair share of regrets. I was part of that, and so were you. The weight of his words hung heavily in the room. Amelia couldn't decide if she was more confused or frightened. Her mind raced, but she felt as if she were being pulled deeper into something she wasn't prepared for. A story that began long before she had ever been born. Oliver stepped closer, lowering his voice. There are things about Margaret that you're only beginning to understand. This inheritance. It's more than just money. It's about something far greater, something that you've already started to uncover. But beware, Amelia. There are people who will do anything to make sure the truth stays buried. With that, he turned and left, leaving Amelia standing in the darkened hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. The questions piled up faster than she could process them, and the sense of unease grew stronger with each passing day. As the night deepened, Amelia sat at the old desk in the study, the journal open before her. She tried to make sense of Margaret's cryptic entries, but they only raised more questions. The past, it seemed, was tangled with lies and secrets, and Amelia was only beginning to untangle the web. The sound of a door creaking open behind her startled her, and she spun around to find the door to the manor cellar ajar. She had never noticed it before, and it seemed almost as if it had been waiting for her to discover it. Amelia's curiosity got the better of her, and despite the warning that echoed in her mind, she stood up and walked toward the cellar door. As she descended the creaky wooden steps, the air grew colder. The smell of earth and mildew filled her nose as she reached the bottom of the stairs. The cellar was dark, but Amelia could just make out the shapes of old crates and furniture covered in dusty sheets. It was clear that no one had been down here in years. Then something caught her eye. An old iron chest, much larger than the one upstairs, sitting in the far corner of the room. The lock was rusted, but there was a strange magnetic pull to it. She felt as though she had no choice but to approach it. Her hand shook as she reached for the chest. She had no idea what it might contain, but the more she stared at it, the more certain she became that this was the key to everything. The truth about her grandmother, about Oliver, and about the inheritance that was now her responsibility. It was all buried beneath the surface, and Amelia was determined to uncover it. Amelia stood in the dimly lit cellar, her fingers still resting on the rusted lock of the large iron chest. Her heart thudded in her chest, the silence of the room almost oppressive. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with thoughts of what could be inside. The air around her seemed to grow heavier, the very walls of the old house pressing in on her as though the manor itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to make a decision. With trembling hands, Amelia reached for the lock. It was old and brittle, but the moment her fingers touched it, a strange sensation washed over her, a mixture of curiosity and dread. Her grandmother had hidden many things from her, but this felt different. This wasn't just about family secrets or forgotten heirlooms. This was something much deeper, something that had been kept buried for decades. After a few moments, Amelia's persistence paid off. The lock clicked open, and she slowly lifted the heavy lid of the chest. Inside, instead of the expected dusty old relics or forgotten treasures, she found something far more unsettling. A collection of journals, letters, and a small wooden box that seemed far too important to be tucked away with such mundane things. She pulled the wooden box from the chest, its surface smooth, its edges worn from years of neglect. The box felt warm in her hands, as though it had been waiting for her touch. As she opened it, Amelia found a small, intricately carved key inside. It was beautiful and odd, too delicate for a simple lock. The design on it was unfamiliar, like something from an ancient culture, with symbols she couldn't quite decipher. But there was no doubt in her mind. This key was important. The journals and letters were full of details that only raised more questions. They chronicled the complicated relationship between her grandmother, Oliver, and a third mysterious figure. The name on the letters was unfamiliar to her. Edmund Hawke. The more Amelia read, the clearer it became that her grandmother had been involved in something far darker than she had ever imagined. Oliver's role in this was becoming more and more complex, and Amelia couldn't understand why her grandmother had kept all of this hidden. With the key in her pocket and the letters in hand, she left the cellar, her mind swirling. The puzzle pieces were beginning to come together, but they didn't make any sense. Why had her grandmother hidden all of this? Why had she never mentioned Oliver's past, or Edmund Hawke, or the strange key? The more Amelia thought about it, the more she realized that the truth wasn't going to be easy to uncover. The following days were filled with restless nights and long hours spent combing through the journals. Amelia began to notice a pattern. Certain names and places kept cropping up, ones that didn't make any sense. The letters from Edmund Hawke spoke of hidden treasures, of secrets passed down through generations, and of a promise made to protect something precious. As Amelia grew more absorbed in the mystery, she began to see Oliver everywhere. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but then she realized that he was watching her. There were subtle signs: a door left ajar, a shadow crossing the hallway, a figure slipping past the edge of her vision. It was as if he were trying to guide her, or perhaps keep her away from something. But what? And why? The unsettling feeling grew stronger each day, and Amelia could no longer ignore the mounting tension. One evening, she decided to confront Oliver. She needed answers, and she needed them now. She found him in the drawing room, sitting by the fireplace, his face cast in shadow. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "I know you've been watching me," Amelia said, her voice steady, though she could feel her pulse quickening. "I know about the journals, the letters, and the key." "What's going on, Oliver? What aren't you telling me?" Oliver didn't flinch. He simply looked at her, his gaze penetrating, almost as though he were weighing her every word. "You're getting too close, Amelia. There are things that you're not ready to understand yet." "Then tell me. Tell me everything," she demanded, her frustration boiling over. For a moment, Oliver remained silent, the flickering firelight casting eerie shadows on his face. Then finally he spoke. "The truth is more dangerous than you think. Your grandmother was trying to protect you from it, but now it's too late." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. "Protect me? From what?" Oliver stood up slowly, moving towards her with a deliberate calmness. "From the truth about Edmund Hawke. From the truth about the inheritance you've received. You don't know what's at stake, Amelia. There are people who will stop at nothing to get their hands on it." A cold shiver ran down her spine. The weight of his words settled heavily in the room. Amelia's hands shook as she clutched the journal to her chest. The key in her pocket seemed to grow heavier by the second. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock at the door. Oliver's expression darkened. "You need to leave. Now." Before she could ask another question, he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the manor. Amelia stood frozen, her mind reeling. She had learned so much, yet she still had so many questions. What was it that her grandmother had been trying to protect her from? What did Edmund Hawke have to do with all of this? And most importantly, what was the key for? Amelia didn't wait any longer. She knew that her next step was crucial, and there was no turning back now. As the night deepened, she grabbed the key and the letters and set out for the place that seemed to hold the final piece of the puzzle, the manor's hidden chapel. Amelia stood still for a moment, her hands gripping the ancient book she had discovered in the chapel. The words were heavy in her mind, a collection of secrets and histories she never expected to learn. As she had flipped through its pages, each word seemed to pull her deeper into a tangled web of deception, betrayal, and unimaginable power. The story told in that book wasn't just about her inheritance, nor was it about the life of her late grandmother. It was about something much darker, a conspiracy that had lasted for generations. Her grandmother, it seemed, had known far more than she had ever let on. The book was a record of a secret pact made with Edmund Hawke, a man who, as it turned out, had been far more than a distant acquaintance. He was involved in a dangerous game, one that Amelia had unwittingly been thrust into. The Hawke family had a long history tied to an underground network that sought control over resources far more valuable than money, the kind of power that could shape the world. As Amelia stepped away from the altar, a sudden realization hit her like a cold gust of wind. The weight of her inheritance was not just about money. It was about control, influence, and a future that could very well be manipulated by those with darker intentions. The moment she had inherited the estate, she had become part of something much larger than herself, a chess piece in a game whose rules she barely understood. She turned back to the chapel door, hearing the sound of footsteps behind her. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't alone. It was Oliver. His face was more serious than she'd ever seen it. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a cold intensity that sent a chill down Amelia's spine. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes not leaving hers. There was a heaviness in the air, as if everything they had shared until this point had been building up to this very moment. "You shouldn't have come here, Amelia," Oliver said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "You don't know what you're dealing with. The truth you're looking for. It's not something you can control." Amelia's mind raced, trying to comprehend what he was saying. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What is this all about, Oliver? What are you hiding?" Oliver shook his head, his expression unreadable. "I'm not hiding anything," he said, his tone sharp. "But you need to understand that this inheritance, it's more dangerous than you think. There are people out there who would stop at nothing to take it from you. And if you're not careful, they'll destroy everything you care about." Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to demand more answers, but Oliver's words had hit her like a hammer. She had thought she understood the situation, thought she was simply trying to uncover the truth of her grandmother's past. But now, she realized there was so much more at play. This wasn't just about a legacy or a family secret. This was a fight for power, for control over something that could change the course of history. For a moment, Amelia felt a wave of fear wash over her, but she quickly pushed it aside. She couldn't afford to be scared. Not now. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. Oliver's gaze softened slightly as he continued. "You don't have to do this, Amelia. You don't have to carry this burden. Let it go before it's too late." But Amelia was resolute. She had come to understand something in that moment. The secrets, the danger, the power. It was all a part of her now. She couldn't just walk away. Not when the truth was within reach. "No," she said firmly. "I have to finish this. For my grandmother. For myself." Oliver's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dark crossing his face. "Then be prepared, Amelia. You've just opened a door you can't close." With those words, he turned and walked out of the chapel, leaving Amelia alone with her thoughts, and with the heavy burden of the truth she had just uncovered. Amelia took a deep breath and glanced at the book in her hands once more. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the dangers were real. But she knew one thing for certain. She would not back down. Not now. Not ever. She turned and walked out of the chapel, the weight of her inheritance and the knowledge it brought pressing heavily on her shoulders. There was still so much she needed to understand, but she was ready. She had no choice but to face the dark reality that awaited her. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that Oliver's words were more than just a warning. They were a veiled threat. The coldness in his voice, the certainty in his eyes, all pointed to something far more dangerous than just an inheritance. As she stepped into the small flat she had rented for herself in London, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease hanging in the air. The silence of the empty room felt suffocating. Every corner of the flat seemed to hide secrets of its own, and now so did she. She placed the ancient book carefully on her coffee table, its worn leather cover still holding a sense of weight she couldn't ignore. The book wasn't just a relic of her grandmother's past. It was a key. But to what? And who else wanted to unlock its power? As Amelia tried to focus on the book in front of her, her mind wandered to the conversation with Oliver. His warning had only deepened the mystery. What was it that made her inheritance so valuable? And why did Edmund Hawke, a man with connections that spanned continents, have so much to do with it? The idea that her grandmother might have been involved in such dangerous dealings disturbed her, but the book, its secrets, and its potential kept pulling her back. She had no time to waste. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, and she needed answers before it was too late. But where could she go for help? The only person who might have any information on the Hawkes was, ironically, someone she'd spent her life avoiding. Her estranged uncle, Jonathan Hawke. Jonathan was the black sheep of the Hawke family, the one who had chosen to distance himself from the family business years ago, disavowing the power struggle that ran through his bloodline. He was a man of few words, reclusive, and difficult to trust, but Amelia had no choice but to reach out to him. Her grandmother had mentioned him in passing on several occasions, always with a sense of regret, but she had never shared the details of their falling out. It was time to find out what had happened. And more importantly, what he knew. Amelia picked up the phone and dialed the number she had found in one of her grandmother's old letters. She didn't expect a warm response. The history between her family and Jonathan was fraught with tension, but she was determined. As the phone rang, she could hear her own heartbeat, loud in her ears. She wasn't sure what to expect. She wasn't even sure if Jonathan would pick up. The line clicked, and a gruff voice answered. "Jonathan Hawke," the voice said, its tone flat and uninterested. "Uncle Jonathan," Amelia said, trying to steady her voice. "It's Amelia. We need to talk." There was a long pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. "What is it now, Amelia?" Jonathan finally asked, his voice laced with reluctance. "I told you years ago to stay away from the Hawke name. It's dangerous." "It's always been dangerous." "I know," she replied, her grip tightening on the phone. "But I've found something. Something important. And I need your help." The silence that followed was thick, and for a moment, Amelia wasn't sure if he would respond. But then she heard him mutter something under his breath. "Where are you?" Jonathan asked. Amelia gave him the address of her flat, and after a few more moments of tense silence, Jonathan agreed to meet her. "I'll be there in an hour," he said. "But be warned, Amelia, the truth you're looking for might destroy you." The words hung in the air like a dark omen, and as the call ended, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping further into a world of shadows and deceit. She had made her choice. She would face whatever was coming head-on, but the cost of the truth seemed higher than she had imagined. Amelia arrived at the quiet pub in the outskirts of London, the one her uncle had mentioned. The low murmur of conversations and the clinking of glasses filled the air as she walked through the door, but she couldn't shake the tension that had settled in her chest. She had no idea what Jonathan might say, or whether he would even help her. But there was no turning back now. The secrets of her grandmother's past were now tied to her own future. As she scanned the room, she spotted him sitting in a corner booth, his back to the wall, a pint of beer in front of him. Jonathan Hawke hadn't changed much in the years since she had last seen him. His dark hair was graying at the temples, and there were lines of age etched into his face, but his sharp eyes still held that same distant, guarded look. Amelia hesitated for a moment before walking over to the booth. Jonathan looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. He motioned for her to sit. "You've come," he said, his voice low, almost too quiet for the bustling pub. "I thought you'd be smarter than this, Amelia." Amelia sat down opposite him, feeling the weight of his gaze. "I don't have a choice, Uncle. There's something I need to understand. I need to know what happened to my grandmother, and why everything was left to me." Jonathan took a long drink from his pint before setting it down, his fingers tracing the rim absently. "You think you're ready for the truth?" "I'm not sure anyone ever is," he replied, his voice laced with bitterness. "The Hawkes are no strangers to power struggles, and your grandmother, well, she was no different." Amelia felt a chill run through her as she listened to her uncle's words. She had always known that the Hawkes were a family defined by ambition and ruthlessness, but the idea that her grandmother might have been involved in such dark dealings was unsettling. Jonathan leaned forward, lowering his voice even further. "I know what you found," he said, nodding towards the leather-bound book Amelia had been carrying since the day her grandmother passed away. "That book. It's not just a collection of memories or old family stories. It's a record. A ledger, if you will." "A ledger?" Amelia asked, confusion creeping into her voice. "What do you mean?" "The book holds the key to everything," Jonathan said, his voice heavy with a mixture of regret and warning. "It's not just about inheritance or money. It's about power. The Hawkes made deals, alliances that go back decades, some even longer. And your grandmother was at the center of it all. The book. It's a map. A guide to the places, the people, the deals that were made to build the family's empire." Amelia's heart raced as she absorbed his words. The idea that her grandmother had been involved in such dangerous business was one thing, but the idea that Amelia herself might now be tied to it all was another. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what lay ahead, but she knew she had no choice. "Why didn't she ever tell me?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why didn't she warn me about this?" Jonathan sighed, his eyes darkening. "She didn't want you to know. She didn't want you to become part of this world. But it was inevitable. The Hawkes are like a web. You get caught in it whether you want to or not." Amelia felt a surge of anger. "So what now? What do I do with this book?" "With the inheritance?" Jonathan looked at her steadily. You have two choices, Amelia. You can walk away. Leave the hawks behind and never look back. But I think you know that's not going to happen. The second option is to take control. Take the power that comes with the inheritance and the book. But be warned, you're not the only one who wants it. There are people out there, people with their own agendas, and they'll do anything to get what's in that book. The weight of his words settled over her like a thick fog. Amelia could feel the gravity of her situation. This was no longer just about family history or inheritance. It was about survival. The moment she had opened that book, she had stepped into a world of dangerous secrets, and now there was no going back. What do you suggest I do? Amelia asked, her voice steady despite the rising panic inside her. Jonathan's eyes narrowed, and he leaned in closer. You need to find out who's behind this. Who's been pulling the strings all these years. And you need to be ready to make a choice. The wrong decision could cost you everything. Amelia swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had come to her uncle for answers, but now she realized that the questions were only just beginning. The deeper she dug, the more she would uncover, and the more dangerous this journey would become. As they sat in silence, Amelia couldn't help but feel the weight of the legacy she had inherited. The Hawke family, with all its dark secrets, was hers now. And the truth would come at a price. Amelia couldn't shake the unsettling feeling as she left the pub, Jonathan's words still echoing in her mind. What had she really gotten herself into? The book in her bag felt heavier than ever, its secrets now entwined with her fate. She needed to find out more, to uncover the full extent of what her grandmother had been involved in. Her mind raced as she made her way to the small flat she'd rented in the city. There were more pieces to the puzzle, more questions that needed answering. And she knew that in order to make any sense of it, she would need to confront the past, the dangerous, twisted legacy of the Hawke family. As she entered the flat and locked the door behind her, Amelia took a deep breath. The first thing she did was pull the book from her bag and lay it out on the table. The leather cover seemed almost alive under the dim light of the room. She could feel the weight of the history contained within its pages, the burden of the power it held. She opened the book carefully, flipping through the delicate pages until she reached the section marked with an old, faded ribbon. It was a series of names, names she hadn't seen before, and that her grandmother had never mentioned. Each name was followed by a date and a small note. Some were straightforward, others cryptic, but there was a pattern. The dates seemed to align with major events in the Hawke family's history. Marriages, betrayals, business deals, and disappearances. Amelia's heart skipped a beat as she stumbled across a name that made her blood run cold. Thomas Hawke. The name was underlined in bold, and the date beside it was less than 5 years before her grandmother's death. A note beside it simply read, "A debt long overdue." The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Who was Thomas Hawke? And what debt was her grandmother talking about? Amelia had never heard of him before. But the fact that her grandmother had kept this information so hidden, so secret, meant it was important. It meant that whatever debt had been owed, it had been a weight that had haunted her grandmother, perhaps even driven her actions in the final years of her life. The sound of a doorbell ringing broke Amelia's concentration, and she quickly closed the book, her heart pounding in her chest. Who could be at her door at this hour? She cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole. Standing on the other side was a man in a dark coat, his features obscured by the shadows. He didn't look familiar, but there was something about him that sent a chill through her. Amelia took a step back, her mind racing. Could this be someone from her grandmother's past? Someone who knew more about Thomas Hawke, or perhaps someone sent to retrieve the book. The man rang the bell again, this time with more urgency. Amelia hesitated for a moment before making up her mind. She wasn't going to let fear control her. Not now. She needed answers, and this could be her chance to get them. She opened the door slowly, keeping the chain lock in place. The man's eyes locked onto hers, and he stepped forward without speaking, his presence imposing. "You're Amelia Hawke?" he asked, his voice low and clipped. Amelia nodded cautiously. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man hesitated, then glanced around, as though making sure no one was watching. "I have information," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Information about your grandmother and Thomas Hawke." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. "What do you know?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not here," he said urgently. Meet me tomorrow night at the old Hawk estate. I'll tell you everything. But be careful. There are others who want the book. And they'll do anything to get it. Before Amelia could respond, the man turned and quickly disappeared into the shadows. She stood in the doorway, her mind whirling. What had she just agreed to? And more importantly, who else was after the book? Was it truly the key to the family's dark history, or had she been drawn into something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined? The next night, Amelia found herself standing in front of the imposing Hawk estate, its dark silhouette looming against the starless sky. The house had been abandoned for years, ever since the last of the Hawk family had left. She never imagined that she would return here, but now, the truth was pulling her back, deeper into the web of her family's secrets. The air was thick with tension as she walked up the long path toward the front door. Her heart raced with anticipation and fear. She had no idea what she was about to face, but there was no turning back now. As she reached the door, it creaked open slowly, revealing the dark interior of the mansion. The man was waiting for her, his face now partially illuminated by the faint light from the hallway. He motioned for her to follow him. "Come in," he said quietly. "We don't have much time." Amelia stepped inside, the door shutting behind her with a heavy thud. She felt a shiver run down her spine. This was no longer just a search for answers. This was a descent into a world she was never meant to uncover. The night air was thick with tension as Amelia stepped into the darkened halls of the Hawk estate. Her footsteps echoed in the silence, her heart pounding in her chest. The mansion had stood abandoned for years, its once grand halls now draped in dust and decay. The man who had called her here, this mysterious figure who knew so much about her grandmother and Thomas Hawk, was waiting inside, and Amelia knew that whatever secrets he held could change everything. As she followed him through the shadowy corridors, a sense of foreboding settled over her. The house seemed alive with memories, the creaking floorboards and whispering wind carrying the weight of generations past. Amelia's grip on the book tightened, knowing that the truth lay within its pages, but it was still locked away, out of reach. Finally, they reached a small study at the back of the house. The man motioned for Amelia to sit at the old desk, its surface covered in yellowed papers and old photographs. On the wall behind him, a large portrait of the Hawk family loomed, their proud faces staring down at her. "Who are you?" Amelia asked again, her voice firm despite the fear creeping into her chest. The man sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "My name is Oliver. Thomas Hawk was my great-grandfather," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I've spent my life trying to uncover the truth about the Hawk legacy. And now, it seems you're the key to unlocking it." Amelia stared at him in disbelief. "Your great-grandfather?" she repeated. "But I never knew. I never even heard his name before." Oliver nodded. "That's because the family has been hiding the truth for decades. Thomas Hawk was no ordinary man. He was a visionary, a businessman who made deals with powerful people, some of whom were unsavory. And your grandmother, Marjorie, was one of his closest confidants. But she got involved in something dark, something that went beyond the family business." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Oliver hesitated, then motioned to the book in Amelia's hands. "That book contains everything. The debts, the betrayals, the deals that were made in the shadows. Thomas Hawk owed a lot of people, Amelia. And your grandmother, Marjorie, made sure that when he died, his legacy would live on, but not the way anyone thought." Amelia opened the book, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages, stopping at the section marked with Thomas Hawk's name. The notes were clearer now. He had indeed made secret deals. Dangerous, illegal ones. But what was even more unsettling was the final entry. It was dated just weeks before her grandmother's death. The note beside it read, "The debt has been paid. The book is the key. Amelia must inherit everything." "What does this mean?" Amelia whispered, looking up at Oliver. "It means," Oliver began, his voice thick with emotion, "that your grandmother didn't just protect the Hawk legacy. She hid the truth. She kept this book for you, to ensure that you were the one to uncover what had been buried." Amelia sat back, her mind racing. She had thought she was just inheriting a fortune, a house, money, and a name. But now, she realized the inheritance was something much greater. She was being handed a legacy steeped in blood, betrayal, and secrets that could change the course of history. "And now," she asked quietly, looking at Oliver. What happens now? Oliver's eyes darkened. Now, we take control of the family's future. We reveal the truth. But we have to be careful. There are those who will stop at nothing to keep the past buried, to erase everything your grandmother did. They'll come after you, Amelia. They'll come after the book. Amelia felt a chill run down her spine, but there was no turning back now. The legacy was hers to claim, but it would come at a cost. She was ready for whatever came next, prepared to fight for the truth her family had tried to bury. As Amelia stood up and walked toward the door, Oliver's voice stopped her. You don't have to do this alone, he said. We're in this together. Amelia turned to him, her resolve strengthening. I'll finish what my grandmother started, she said, her voice unwavering. And I'll make sure the truth comes to light, no matter what it takes. With the book in her hands and the Hawk legacy at her feet, Amelia knew her life was about to change forever. But one thing was clear. The past would no longer control her. She was ready to forge her own path, one that would uncover the hidden truths of the Hawk family and ensure that the future would be shaped by the choices she made, not by the shadows of the past. As she stepped out of the Hawk estate into the night, Amelia felt a sense of finality settle over her. She had uncovered the truth. And now, she would shape her own destiny.